the Spirit of Unity's online ministry. My name is Reverend Alicia-Leslie, and I'm so excited today that we're going to move into a study of the biblical allegories, the stories that answer the questions: where did we come from? Where did the earth come from? How did we get here? Why is there suffering? It's so exciting. Now, there's one thing I want to address, very important right up front. Are they true stories? Maybe not. Are they truth stories? Absolutely. I think one of the things that happens is that people will hear the stories, and if they're told this is the literal, inerrant Word of God, we have to go, wow, it's kind of crazy. So I'm going to ask you to suspend the need to have literal understanding right away. We will get into that. We're just at the beginning of a wonderful, long journey and adventure together. So today, I want to recap a little bit of what we talked about last week. First of all, that this tradition, what is called our Bible, began as an oral tradition. It was passed down through stories, through the ages and generations for thousands of years. At one point in time, as we developed the language and the ability to write it down, it went from being oral to written tradition. Then it had to be interpreted so that people that spoke different languages can understand it. Remember, no printing presses in those days, so it had to be recopied over and over and over again so that people could have it and it could be distributed. Wow, how could it possibly be that that Bible did not get, some major erroneous revisions through this whole process? What you need to know is that whereas time changes, culture changes, different things happen, principles of truth never change. So we're going to be taking a key that we call metaphysics, and we're going to be unlocking the truth that is at the core of these stories. Some of the languaging in it is called symbolic. Symbols, which Jung called archetypes, have a universal meaning to all people everywhere. These symbols, called archetypes, can be something like when we see the sun, we think of light things and happy things. Not only that, the sun actually does it so big and powerful. How could we not connect it with God? And we all know that scientifically, if we have a lack of sunlight, we're probably not in the best mood. So we are going into this to shed a little light on it by using symbols. Now, here's another really important thing, that you want to know that you really have to interpret the stories in your own heart and soul. And this is not a biblical story, but it is an absolute story about understanding something. Many years ago, I went to Egypt, and I was so excited, and one of the things I wanted to do most was go to the Museum of Cairo. Well, I had met someone on the plane, and he was so kind in taking me to meet his family and such, and we wound up, the day we were going to go to the museum, his brother insisted on showing me all of the apartment buildings he owned and things that were important to him in Egypt. We did not get to the museum till an hour and a half before closing. So we got in there, and he grabbed me by the arm, and he quickly ran me around, and he told me what every item was that he was pointing it out and telling me what it was. There was only one thing wrong. He was wrong. You see, what he wasn't thinking about was there, written in English, was an explanation of what that item was. Hello, I can read. I read it was. Now, it was like as if he was telling me that this boat was a drinking vessel. You can have drinking vessels that look like boats, but I saw the boat, and I saw underneath it said, boat. So you kind of can figure it out yourself, So it's very, very important that you turn within. The Bible was spiritually inspired by people who were turning to God, to Spirit, for the answers to life's questions, and they were given those answers, which were then filtered through their consciousness. The same way I could read what item was that was in the museum, I said, oh yes, that's right, that makes sense. As a matter of fact, that's what really drew me into unity. I found a teaching that inside said, oh yes, that makes sense. Maybe that's why we call it spiritual, translation. We call it practical Christianity because it's practical. It makes sense. Well, let's move into our book for today. We're going into Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. Now, the word Genesis means beginnings. Now, just saying that reminds me that a very important thing is etymology. Etymology is the study of words, their history, and their meaning. Unfortunately, when the Bible translations have moved along, they've been translated to be like politically correct. You really miss some of the metaphysics if when you're interpreting metaphysically, males and men represent our thinking faculties and women symbolize our feeling faculties, our emotions. If they're saying people or humans, we're missing the point. So it is very important that you look to the true meaning, the original meanings of words as we do metaphysical interpretation. Okay, so we're moving on. The word Genesis means beginning. It's like a story. Don't forget the Bible tells a story of humankind, our relationship with God and each other. So it's like opening a storybook, and what does it say? It says, once upon a time. Well, the Bible says, in the beginning. Now, I'm going to share the story of creation with you today, but I'm going to share it in what I think, if we're talking about light and enlightenment, I'd like to do it in a light way. I'm going to be using a wonderful little book called Old Charlie Farquharson's Testament. And it's a kind of a folksy interpretation. It's not an interpretation. Translation, maybe a little interpretation on the side of the Bible. So what I want to do is I want to share. And as I share, I'm going to go back and forth to the principles that they're talking about. Okay, are you ready? Now, if you want to go get your own Bible so you can kind of read along in what the Bible says, your version says, just hit pause and go get it, and I'll be right here. Okay, this is called the first book of Moses, called Jenny Says. It says, at the start, there weren't a thing. That'd be your void. Dark, too, and absolute chaos. So God decided to do something about it. He said, let's have some light here. And there was, right off, but there weren't nothing to look at. Now, when we talk about light and interpret that spiritually, it is like illumination. It is like the light coming on. That's why, again, it's a symbol. It's a metaphysical term. When you see that little light bulb going on over someone's head, they're like, aha, I got the light. So think of that as we're translating. Every person, place, thing, color, location, everything in the Bible is symbolic. It's translated into having meaning for our lives. So let's keep going. It said, he kept your dark too. Now he had two things going for him, night and day. He had the one follow the other so he could keep track. That was all in a day's work. Now, you remember from the story of creation what? It happened in 6 days. Now, some people say, what? Come on, did God really create everything in 6 days? And what am I saying to that? I'm saying try to lift criticism, lift looking for dotting I's and crossing T's so you can see a bigger picture. These are allegories. These are conceptual stories answering deep life questions in a way that we can understand. But don't you be kidded. There is very important truth in there. Okay. Don't you be kidded. I think I've been reading this too long. Let's move along. On the second day, God said, we need some kind of firmament in the middle of all this water. Don't ask me where the firmament would shore up some of the water from the rest of the water. The firmament part he called heaven, and that was quite enough for the second day. Now, when we talk about firmament, I used to think many years ago that was like earth, it was like what we stood on, but the firmament means it's like the gelling, it's the coming together of ideas. The water represents all potential ideas. If we just think about it, all these ideas that are swimming around that we haven't caught from the waters, from the deep. Well, as those ideas begin to come into manifestation, they are clear. So what he's doing is lifting this firmament. He's lifting up a gelled concept of a divine idea so that it could be manifested. It's also showing that there is night and day. Night and day. There is energy and activity, and then there is a resting in between. That is so important to us. We kind of try to overlook the resting part in between. You know, it says, the day and the night are good. The night is for resting. The day is for activity. But what do? We get light bulbs, electricity, TVs, things to keep us occupied in the night where it might be a good idea if we were resting and renewing ourselves. See, there's so much in here, practical teaching to bless your life. It says, but there was still all that loose water, so he gathered most of what was under heavens and called them the seas. So far, not a thing to stand on, God thought. What on earth will I do? That's when he let your dry land come up, and he said, that's good. So that's where the earth comes in. Here's a cute little concept when it's, making your mind crazy. How can there be day or night if there was no physical earth? Because how do we count day and night? By the earth going around the sun and, revolving, rotating on its axis and revolving around the sun. Gosh, that one brings me back to my old science classes. Okay, so the earth that comes up is like fertile soil. This is something that we can begin to stand on, and it represents imagination. When you've got fertile soil, all kinds of things can come up from it, which is where it goes. It says, earth brought up grass, grass brought up herb, herb brought up seed, seed brung trees, trees brung fruit, and it was good. So far, 3 days. That'd be God days. And it was very important, these things, when they got to the seed, that everything that comes up from the earth has the ability to multiply. Then God said, we need lights at night too. So he made the moon for a night light. God figured to go for years. Again, this is reiterating the importance of daytime activity, nighttime resting, and in the nighttime there is still growth going on that we don't see. Another thing I like to point out about the sun and the moon is the sun, bright, representing God, reflects on the surface of the moon, and so you can see it. It doesn't have a light of its own, but you can see it. So to me that kind of says that I shine when I shine forth the light of God. I like that one. Okay, so he's got the sun and the moon. Then he said he put some side lights in too. Not much to light things up, but to give the place a bit of a glow. That'd be your stars. The moon and the stars work nights, and the sun was put on the day shift. God thought that setup would work out all right. That was your 4th day and night by that time. God said, look here, there's been nothing doing in these waters. Better stir some things up a bit. Better get some creatures moving. Air's kind of empty too. Might as well foul it up. Then he done a whale of a job down to your smallest mini. Then they was all told to get at it and be fruitful and multiplying. That'd be your 5th. At this time on earth, nothing doing. All that grass and herb and nothing to pasture on it. So he called forth cattle and beasts and other creepy things, and there was nothing bad about that. You notice it always says, and and God said it was good. It was very good. Now, the coming forth, the spiritual interpretation of the birds of the air are our higher super consciousness that, see, they're in the heavens, they're closer to where, we conceptualize God to be. The fish in the ocean, filling in the water, or in the waters, all the possibility, it's all the thoughts of our subconscious mind, and then the cattle and the creepy crawly things that walk on the earth, that represents our conscious awareness, the things you can see, the things, there are human thoughts. Then God took an awful chance. He said, somebody has got to supervise all these dominions of mine on earth, under the water, and even pretty well up in the air too. Except the angels, don't ask me where they come from all of a sudden. So God thought up somebody to look just like him. And of course, there we have the first telling of the creation of man, of humankind. Now understand, everything in Genesis 1 is about the concepts, the divine ideas being solidified and generated. He called this fella man and told him the same thing about being fruitful and multiplying, even though so far there was only one of them. I think that's kind of cute because, again, it's one of those things that we were told, God said it, I believe it, that's the way it is, you better follow it. And the thing is, questioning is good because questioning helps us find the answers we want and need. And God said to man, the place is yours. Take care of it for me and take care of yourself too. And God thought all that was good. And he was tired. He'd been at it 6 days. Days? God days? That reminds me of a funny story about a man that really wanted to know God, and so he went up on the top of a mountain, he started talking to God, and he said, God, I'm so confused. Help me to understand you. How long have we been here? What is time to you? How long is a minute to you, God? And God said, a minute is like 1,000,000 years. And he said, well, God, I don't understand. We have money, but I don't understand money. I don't understand how much I'm supposed to have. What's my fair share? How much is $1,000,000 to you, God? And God said, $1,000,000 is like a penny to me. The man thought about it for a minute and he said, God, can I have a penny? And God said, in a minute. See, so it's about the translation and the interpretation. One of the things that's so important to remember is that this story of creation tells how things progress, and that when God got this first thing done, he said it was good and he rested. Can we trust that what God is bringing to us, what God has created for us, is inherently good? And what really matters is what we do with it. Some people misinterpret that God said to Adam that he would have dominion over all of the earth and the creatures. Well, you know what? Dominion is not domination. To have dominion over something is to take care of it and to make sure it's got the very best of everything. Why? So it and you and I can be fruitful and multiply. I invite you to take this story into your heart and to know that there is so many wonderful things that you can get not only from this story, but from all the stories. Next week, we're going to look at the fall of man, which is also called original sin. We're going to find out how Adam got even, what does that mean to you and me, and how they wound up getting kicked out of paradise. And every time you have pain and suffering, unhappiness in your life, chances are you just got kicked out of paradise. Life was meant to be good. So let's find out a way to live it. I'm so looking forward to seeing you next week. God bless you. Have a great week.